What's good, guys? Fantasy Joe back here with another league winners video. Today we are breaking down our wide receiver league winners. Did running backs earlier last week. Check that video out too. Bunch of good stuff in there. And QBs will be coming very shortly, so check all that stuff out. Also, stay tuned. I'm going to be going live later this week. I'll be announcing that shortly. Check that out. Helping you guys any live questions, just talking fantasy, all that good stuff. If you guys are new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. You're going to be there. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And let's start talking about some wide receiver league winners. Okay, so Amari Cooper's our first league winner, but before I talk about him, let's talk about two guys that were just a little bit too high in the ADP to be qualified for league winners. Those two guys being, I love them as values in the third round, A.J. Brown and Keenan Allen. A.J. Brown did an absolute ton of work last year on two bad knees. Didn't get many targets last year either. Had around 106 targets, I believe, and turned that into like wide receiver 11. Draft A.J. Brown. I don't see his targets going down, even with Julio Jones there. Even if he gets the same amount of targets he did last year, I still expect him to produce. He's been highly efficient his entire career. Draft him. Second up is Keenan Allen. If you excuse his injured games last season and take out his one start with Tyrod Taylor, and you just count his Justin Herbert starts, he was on pace for 192 targets over 17 games. Absolutely insane. Justin Herbert loves to target his number one receiver, and that is obviously Keenan Allen. So draft him as well in that third round. I think those guys are great values if you're looking at receivers in the third round. But let's talk about Amari Cooper. I love Amari Cooper this year. His average draft position right now. Let me check my notes. You can hear that paper rustling. 408 and a half point PPR leagues, which is absolutely ridiculous. I love, if you can draft him in the fourth round of your leagues, I love drafting him there. Obviously, I think CeeDee Lamb is, a breakout, but he's a guy who's going in that third round. I feel like he's being drafted a lot higher than Amari Cooper, and I think Amari Cooper is still going to be very good for fantasy, even if CeeDee Lamb does break out. Let's look at Amari Cooper since he's been in Dallas, his 17-game pace is 92.8 receptions, 1,255 yards, and 7.8 touchdowns. Absolutely phenomenal. And last year was basically worst-case scenario for him. He finished as wide receiver 16 and had 92 receptions, 1,114 yards, and 5 touchdowns with Andy Dalton. I think wide receiver 16 is basically his floor, and you can basically draft him there now or pretty close to that floor. And then you get a bunch of upside of him being, I think he's going to end up being a back-end one wide receiver. I think him and CD will probably both be ones this year or close to it. I expect Amari Cooper to ball. I love drafting him in the fourth round. That's what I'm saying. If I can start my drafts with two stud running backs, maybe a tight end and then Amari Cooper, I'm loving that start. And I feel like I've got stability too with Amari Cooper. I have no problem having him as the one on my team. Okay, next up we have Brandon Aiyuk. Now, Brandon Aiyuk had a great rookie year. He had 60 catches in his rookie season, which is absolutely phenomenal, especially considering he only played 12 games. And he turned that into 748 yards, 60 receptions, 5 touchdowns, averaged 12.9 fantasy points per game as a rookie, which is pretty sensational, especially when you put that into some context. If he had played 16 games, he would have finished ahead of Robert Woods at wide receiver 13 in last year's draft if he'd been able to stay healthy, or in last year's scoring rankings if he had been able to stay healthy. He's currently, his average draft position is a 601. I'm very comfortable taking him anywhere in that fifth round, honestly. I think he's a value at that point because of that breakout potential. Usually we see guys take off to that next tier of wide receivers in their second year. That's usually when they make that big jump. I believe Aiyuk is definitely prepared to make that leap. He's one of two wide receivers, according to Pro Football Focus, that last year that graded out as over 90 and all three levels of the field, short, intermediate, and deep. He's a great route runner. He gets open. Brandon Aiyuk was a guy, I remember listening to Chris Sims' podcast Unbuttoned last year, and he's great friends with Kyle Shanahan. And Chris was saying that Shanahan was very tempted to take Aiyuk at 13, and they actually waited and traded up to get him at 25 or 26 in the draft in the first round. But they were willing to take him that high. They believe he's a true difference maker, and I think this is the year we all find out just how good he is. I think the underrated part about Aiyuk too that I brought up Robert Woods earlier. Robert Woods is a stud receiver who normally has 90 receptions, 1,100, 1,200 receiving yards, and 6 or 7 touchdowns every year, right around that range. But what you don't realize is that he also every year rushes for well over 100 yards, runs in a touchdown or two. I think Aiyuk is going to be in a similar situation. Last year, he had 77 rushing yards in 12 games and 2 touchdowns. I think he could be a guy who could add, some production in that rushing game. That's a little sneaky. You don't see it on the stats if you're just looking at normal receiving stats, but it's still there. He still gets points for it, obviously, and those touchdowns count. So that's some sneaky upside that Brandon Aiyuk provides that not many people think about. But I think he could have 1,100 plus yards and then snag 150 on the ground and one or something like that. And he's an explosive player. I'm very excited about him for this upcoming season. All right, let's hop into our next player. Okay, our next 2 guys, I have them both up here, and I'll tell you why. So it's Jeudy and Robby Anderson. Now, the reason I've got both these guys up there, I think Jeudy is going to be this year's Robby Anderson, a good wide receiver that finally was in a position where he was able to break out in fantasy. If we look at what Robby Anderson did last year, I'm not saying this is what he'll do, but I think he could have similar production at the end of the year. Robby Anderson had 95 receptions for 1,096 yards, only 3 touchdowns. He's a great value in drafts this year too. But Jeudy is a rookie. Here, wait, we'll just talk about Robby for a second. So the reason Robby's on this list and Jeudy is originally I was just going to do Jeudy, but Robby Anderson's actually going a little bit later in drafts than Jeudy is, which is absolutely ridiculous because he's, like I said, already broken out. He's a stud receiver. He's being reunited with Sam Darnold. He had a 2.5% touchdown rate on his catches last year. If you look at when he was with Sam Darnold, he had a 6.7% touchdown rate. If he just gets anywhere close, even if he splits the difference, he should be scoring a lot more touchdowns on 95 receptions than 3. I expect him to. I expect him to be used a little bit more down the field this year, especially with Sam Darnold being there and moving on from Teddy Bridgewater. Robby is currently going in the 8th round of drafts, which is a great value. If you can get him in the 8th, I love that. Jeudy's currently going in the late 7th, and here's why I love Jeudy. Last year as a rookie, 52 receptions, 856 yards, averaged 16.5 per catch and 3 touchdowns. He had 26 uncatchable targets, though, and 12 drops. Now, when you look at that statistically, that's like a 46% catch rate, which is absolutely abysmal for an NFL wide receiver. I think whoever his quarterback is this year, he's going to have to be better than that if he wants to play many games. I think, if Drew Lock comes out and sucks, they'll play Teddy Bridgewater, and he'll be a lot better than Drew Lock was last year. No matter what, I feel like he'll be more accurate. And so then if you can just turn that, 113 targets that Jeudy had as a rookie, if he can just turn that into a, average 60% catch rate or something like that, he could have close to 70 receptions. And when you multiply 70 times 16.5, which is what he averages as a rookie, that's well over 1,100 yards. I think he could easily do that. He's another talented player, another great route runner who can get open, get separation. He's got to, solve his own drop issues. Obviously, that's not a guarantee, but I do think, I don't think it's ridiculous to think that he can improve from 46% catch rate last year to 60. He could even go over that. And Cortland Sutton, who I do love, currently banged up a little bit, though. He hasn't has been talking about how, the knee hasn't felt quite right yet. He could come out to a rusty start. Jeudy could have come out and fire. And I really like the value on both Jeudy and Robby Anderson. Okay, Devonta Smith. Devonta Smith is being drafted at the 7-12 right now. I think he's going to have an absolutely massive year. You compare him to guys in the rookie class like Jamar Chase, who's right now going at that 5-6 turn. But he has to compete with Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins for targets. I think Devonta Smith has a lot less competition for targets. The quarterback play is not as good, but I think you could have 130 targets when you're talking about the other receivers on the team. Other guys that can receive targets are Jalen Reagor, Dallas Goedert, Zach Ertz. I just don't think any of them are going to. I think Devonta Smith leads this team in targets as a rookie. He's an excellent route runner. That's a theme of a bunch of these guys. He's going to be able to get open in the NFL right away. Going to be peppered with targets. I think he could be. I think he's going to definitely outperform his position, and think he has the potential to actually go off this year. If Jalen Hurts is good, especially, he could really, do some things in Philadelphia. Oh, wait. Let's look at his stats from Alabama. just real quick, he had 117 receptions last year at Alabama, 1,856 yards, and 23 receiving touchdowns. Okay. Bryan Edwards, last guy on this list. Bryan Edwards is a deep stash. He's being drafted right now at basically the beginning of the 14th round. 6'3" wide receiver, 212 pounds from South Carolina. Was drafted in the 3rd round by the Raiders last year. The reason I'm so excited about him is there's been multiple reports about how he's dominating camp, how he's the red zone weapon, and how he's the starting over John Brown. John Brown, who I think is a good NFL wide receiver, and the fact that him and Henry Ruggs are both starting over him makes me think either John Gruden's drinking too much of his own Kool-Aid, or these guys have actually, taken a step forward and could be big time for fantasy this year, especially Edwards with all the reports of him being Derek Carr's go-to weapon in the red zone. Obviously, I think Darren Waller is going to be the one basically there, but if Edwards could be a 2 with red zone upside, you could draft him this late. I love drafting him late and just seeing how week 1 goes, and then you can cut him afterwards, but the upside's there. If you watch his tape from South Carolina, he's a great jump ball receiver. Not a route runner like a lot of these other guys, but he can elevate, go get that ball, and I think he has an opportunity with the Raiders this year to be very successful for fantasy, especially if these reports of him, taking that step up are true. He had an uninspiring rookie year, but coming into year 2, I think there's a lot of room for improvement. And yeah, with a 14th round pick, I'm willing to take the shot on him. If you guys have made it to this point in the video, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button down below, and if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section down below. I'll respond as always. This is Fantasy Joe. Thanks for watching.